Hey everybody, Zach Ewing here along with Jeff Duncan. We're in our Saints Insider studios and here to present Jeff's new book that just came out this week. It's called A Life Impossible, Memoirs of Steve Gleason, written with Jeff Duncan. I'll just read the cover. A Life Impossible, Living with ALS, Finding Peace and Wisdom Within a Fragile Existence. Just an exciting project, Jeff. I'm sure you're glad to kind of see this thing to the finish line and see the excitement around it.
Yeah, I'm really most grateful for Steve and Michelle Gleason, who, went along with this project when we started 2 years ago and really poured themselves into the project. It was their first book, and to be able to work alongside Steve, and Steve wrote a vast majority of this book. This was not a typical ghostwriting project where I wrote for Steve. I mean, Steve uses this incredible, really miraculous eye tracking technology. And is able to use his computer tablet and write. He's not as fast as he'd like. The technology hasn't gotten there yet, but to see him pour himself into the project and, now be able to experience, the rewards and the gratification of it actually coming out has just been a great experience.
Yeah, obviously you and Steve had a relationship going back. How did the genesis of this project come about? I mean, obviously Steve's got a terminal illness. Writing a book is not something that's done quickly. How did that conversation go and how did it come about?
Well, our relationship goes way back. We actually kind of came to New Orleans at the same time. I started covering the Saints technically in 1999, but really my first year as a beat writer was 2000, and that's when Steve started with the Saints. He was picked up as an undrafted free agent after being released by the Colts, and so he and I, our careers have kind of dovetailed here, and we've always had a good relationship. When Steve retired, I was honored to be able to write that story for the Times-Picayune, and then when he was diagnosed, we worked together to announce it publicly in the Times-Picayune in September of 2011. So we've had a good, close relationship. I'd say very good friends over the years. And when he came out with his documentary back in 2014, we talked about doing a book then, and we figured, no, it's really not the right time. We've got the documentary out, be overexposed. So we kind of put it on the shelf, and then I came back to him a couple of years ago, and he was really interested in doing it at this time of his life. And I think because there's now been more time, he's now 13 years into his diagnosis on this journey with ALS, the book is actually much better than it would have been back in the early 2000s, the early 2010s, because he's now had much more perspective on his journey with ALS, and there's just a lot more that's happened. I mean, they've had a second child. Steve and Michelle have had 2 children, Rivers and Gray, since he's been diagnosed. So there's just a lot that's happened in his life, and Steve was really, really interested in kind of, at this point in his life, kind of telling his story.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because obviously Saints fans know Steve Gleason as the guy who blocked the punt in the Dome coming game and know him for his football contributions and then sort of have rallied emotionally around him since his diagnosis. But I haven't read the book yet, but it's about a lot more than football, right?
Very much so, yes. As a matter of fact, I think we have 3 chapters basically on sports out of 20 chapters in the book. If you know Steve, he's an interesting, compelling person beyond the punt block, beyond his football career. One of the more interesting people I've ever met, been around. He used to always laugh and say, I'm much more than just a meat neck. That was his word for athletes. He was always reading novels in the Saints locker room when he played.
They don't all do that?
Yeah, no, they're very unique. He marches to the beat of his own drum. And so, yes, he definitely was into this project and wanted to tell it the right way. If you know Steve, he's going to be honest and candid, and that's what makes this book so remarkable. Is he and Michelle were willing to share everything. They're very courageous, but also a lot of vulnerabilities, and he makes it clear. Look, I know he's revered around here by a lot of people, rightfully so, but he wants to make it clear that he's a human being just like everybody else, and he has faults, and we lay it all out there in this book, all the ups and downs and the dark tunnels, as Steve says, that they had to go through as a couple and as a family to get to the other side.
So Steve writes most of this book with his eye software. as you mentioned, just remarkable technology that he's able to do that. What then was your role? Did you take that stuff and edit it, add to it? Where do you come into this project?
It was a true collaboration. I think that's how we phrase. I mean, I would write a lot, and then we'd share Google Documents, and all of us, myself, Michelle, and Steve, and then some others we actually pulled into the fray to help us on some of the project. But basically, we had this treasure trove of material because Steve and Michelle were big journalists. I mean, what I mean by that, I mean they kept journals. So we had a lot of material to comb through. Steve also recorded, if you watch the documentary, he recorded these 5-minute videos for his son, Rivers. And we had the transcripts of all those. He recorded dozens of those. So all of this material, I was able to kind of cobble together and then put a rough draft, first draft of each chapter together myself, and then would send it to Steve and Michelle, and then we'd all work together in crafting it and him putting his touch on it. We called it the bones. I would write the bones, and then he would put the heart and soul into it.
Its result is a fabulous book that I think Saints fans will want to get their hands on, and really anybody who just wants to know about the human condition and what it is to live, and then realize that you've only got so long to live. So Life Impossible, Steve Gleason and Jeff Duncan. People can find it in bookstores around the New Orleans area, and I know you have some book signings coming up as well, too.
Yes, hopefully if you get a copy, come out May 9th at Octavia Books at 6 p.m. We'll have a presentation on the book. Steve will do a reading, and he'll do a signing there. And we'll also be at Garden District Books on May 11th, Saturday afternoon from 11 to 2. A little different session there where we'll have really more of like a meet and greet with Steve and Michelle and myself. So if you're in the area, those are both uptown, and we'll have other ones down the road, but those in the next 2 weeks.
So that's May 9th and May 11th for those who get the book early. And we've also got some excerpts coming up starting this weekend in the Times-Picayune, so people can get a feel for what the book's like if you want to see that before you go out and buy it. So, Jeff, any final thoughts on the project?
No, just I really hope everybody gets a chance to read it. Like you said, it's not a football book. It's not an ALS book. It's a very inspiring book, and there's a lot of life lessons in the book that will apply to all walks of life.
All right, we hope you get a copy, and let Jeff know what you think, and let Steve know what you think, and we'll see you down the road.